himself. You have 3 minutes, so yeah, please be aware of the time.
Thank you very much, Lika, and welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Thanos. I am from the Netherlands. I'm also half Greek and part of EUAP Ukraine as well, just to add to the confusion. And I'm running for the 1-year term on the governing body. And I am running in the context of the upcoming European Year of Youth 2022. What better opportunity for a governing board member to dedicate themselves to a 1-year project than with a 1-year term? In the context of the European Year of Youth, what I want, my main priority for the EUAP and for the governing body's role within that is to seek closer connection with European institutions, with European policymaking, and to make the bridge between our network and to quote Hamilton, the room where it happens. I think that we have an amazing network with a lot of intelligence, a lot of knowledge, a lot of insight, and I think that it's a shame that we are not able to translate all the amazing ideas that we come up with on a yearly basis to something that actually works in practice. Aliosha and I were lucky enough to be part of the ambassadors program that took place for the 2nd time the past year, for which we visited Berlin, Strasbourg, and Brussels. Aliosha is now very kindly helping me with the visuals, presenting the youth vision that was compiled and presented to European policymakers. And the one thing that I noticed when we were in Brussels is that a lot of the people who are in the room where it happens are very interested in hearing our opinions. In fact, they welcome it, they seek it out, and it is rather our inability to transfer and to communicate what we would want the future of Europe to look like that is making sure that we don't have the voice that we want to have, rather than their inability or unwillingness to hear what we have to say. So if these people are willing to take time out of their busy schedules to listen to what we have to say, I think it's only fair if we get together and more effectively with one voice communicate what we have to say. I think that the upcoming Year of Youth 2022 is the ideal time to get started, since there will be a lot of funding available from the EU, from the EU institutions within the context of this Year of Youth and also within the context of the Next Gen EU funds to start a program such as this. And of course, the ultimate aim will be for something like this to become a recurring feature of the European Youth Network, preferably each year, so that we can start having a lasting impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thanos. Thank you for your ideas about how we can bridge the EUAP network with broader audience and with decision makers. Now I'm going to give floor to Aliosha. Aliosha, you also have 3 minutes to present yourself.
Hi, everybody. For those who don't know me, who I think are few in this call, I'm Aliosha. I'm 22 years old, but I'm turning 23 in 5 days. Yeah, and I'm running for the 1-year term that's going to also be vacated by Janis Fifka, and I wanted to tell you 3 reasons why. So first of all, I really want to build on our work in diversity, inclusion, and welfare. So I've been a member of the Task Force on Anti-Racism for the past 1.5 years. I helped in setting up the Task Force on Accessibility. I attended, and that was building off work in the Diversity Lab. I've led trainings on welfare and diversity at various EUAP events, including the National Safe Person Training we just had, the HO Summit back last year with the ISs. And in all these roles, I worked closely with Janis Fifka, the leading governing body member, and Isa. But in particular, I want to take over basically Julia's portfolio, build on the actions that she was planning, and also add my own touches to make sure that diversity and inclusion and welfare remain the key priority in our organization. So beyond continuing the work that Julia was going to do, I also want to do things like work towards developing a new census to give us more robust statistics. I noticed when I was, for example, involved in the impact assessment process that we didn't have, and in the task force on anti-racism, that the last time we had a census properly done with an external company was in 2015 with Correlate. And I also want to generally institutionalize the role of task forces and governance, because I think that we need to think more carefully about how voices, especially those that are not don't have as easy access to the institutions in EYP contribute to our decision making. The second thing I want to talk about is our work in active citizenship. I agree with Thanos that we need to engage with external stakeholders. From my point of view, I want to make sure that this doesn't just happen at the top. I want to make it easier for all our events organized by NCs, organized by all the way to the international sessions, and these extra things like the Young Ambassadors projects, and can easily engage everybody from local communities to municipalities to European policymakers. I think it's our responsibility as the governing body to enable the network to reach outside our EYP bubble. And I think I'm well positioned to do this because of my work on the Young Ambassadors project, but also I was a participant of the Active Citizenship Lab, and then I built on that with the EYP Cyprus Energy Think Tank and some other initiatives. And lastly, I think I can bring a critical outside perspective to overall strategic development, because beyond EYP, I had a fair amount of experience working in my previous university and currently in my current university in governance matters and working with other NGOs. So I would bring that to my work and thinking about how over the long term, our funding and governance structures should orient themselves. So these are some reasons. I'm going to wrap it up here, and I'm looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you, Aliosha, and happy early birthday to you. And also thank you for like bringing and like highlighting the diversity portfolio here. I think it's very important. And now next up is Janis. Please, Janis, you have 3 minutes and present yourself.
Yes, thank you very much. Welcome to everyone. Glad you took a little bit time out of your day to come here, but also thanks to those who will probably watch this later and taking an informed decision. I'm Janis, I'm from Germany. I'm not 20 as in my video. I don't know what glitch was in my mind when I said that. So that was not a wrong way to do marketing. I'm actually 28. I need to be honest here. I'm probably more on the other end of age in our network. And I have been in EYP since 2011. So what I think would be mostly interesting today to focus on, and also in this town hall, is to discuss different topics and to see what is the idea of the candidates to solve these topics. Because of course I can tell you now what are the areas of work that I would like to continue working on, and I can briefly do that. It's probably going to be strategy again, it's going to be communication again, like in my previous portfolio on the governing body. And there's also some more things that I would like to work on, and I hope to shed a little bit light on that later as well. But I think the more interesting questions are those where you are asking the candidates what is their idea for the network and how would they solve a problem if it's placed on their table, because that's what is happening during a mandate of the governing body. You just are confronted with new things, and then you as a group have to solve it. My idea for the network is something that is open for innovation and visionary ideas. I have always been one of the people in EYP when doing activities and events asking for the why and why couldn't we do it differently. I was driving my board very crazy when I was head organizer, so I'm not like, I wouldn't call myself being a very conservative in terms of what EYP should be. However, what I really would like to focus on is EYP, promoting EYP and further developing EYP as an educational organization. I believe there is a lot of room in terms of how can we teach young people to use their skills more, and also reaching out to other organization stakeholders outside of EYP. But where I think the biggest difference for me and the other candidates here would be mainly maybe with the active citizenship. I've done activities that go into this direction, but I don't believe that EYP should be an organization that is driving policy, because I don't see that we have the diversity of participants and the structures. Why I see a lot of potential is us as an organization that is very old and has lots of methodological background, and we could share that with others and make it bottom up from the network itself, creating new ways. And I think we have done already a great deal with the strategy, and I hope we can continue this in the next year.
Thank you, Janis, for kind of clearly stating your vision for EYP and for the next year. Now basically we can move on to the Q&A, but before that, I'm going to just also let you know like the blocks that I would like to cover during this town hall. And we also identified some interesting points and the areas that people are interested during the previous town hall. So these are mainly the volunteers and the personal growth and the human resources that we have in the network. The second one is EYP strategy and its implementation. The third one, the priorities for the next year. And the fourth one is inclusion, diversity, and welfare. I think these 4 areas are very relevant and crucial for EYP at large and for the network, for members, as well as how we organize the sessions and our events, and like in which direction should EYP go in next years to come. So basically, I'm going to start with like our first question that you will all be able to answer, that concerns just generally volunteers and the human resources that we have in the network. But after that, and also as we are not a lot during this town hall, we're not a lot of people, and there are also only 3 candidates. I would also just ask you to raise your hands, and I'm going to just give you the floor to ask the questions rather than just write your questions in the chat. Just before that, I think will just spark this conversation with like one very, very important question that also got identified during the BNC meeting that we had just a while ago. This is the sort of challenge that the network is facing right now when it comes to the human resources, when it comes to our volunteers, and when it comes to the fact that we also saw, like, we already have GB election outcome, right? It was not, as also Aliosha mentioned before, that it was not very low, but it was not also something that we are very proud of, right? So what is your vision of like how we need to challenge this challenge in a way that we solve this problem, we make it better? We have sort of human resource crisis in the network right now, how we deal with it. So what part do you see it as a priority next year, or is it something that you would also personally as a GB member would like to take care of? So I think everyone here and also the people who will watch it later will be very interested to hear your opinions when it comes to it. So I'm gonna now start maybe with Aliosha. After Aliosha, Thanos, you can just continue, and then Janis, please answer this question and like bring your ideas.
Great. So there's a lot of approaches to this problem. I'm going to name 2. One is the selection process, and 2 is a culture of inclusion that I think might be helpful here. So I think one of the things that we were more in the past as an organization built around competition. I think that the selection process in terms of like competition can be unhelpful for human resources. Basically, if there's a lot of people that are really interested in positions and they're not selected, they're discouraged from further participating. I think that we can do more to rethink, for example, the role of the jury and how we select officials to help with this human resources crisis. I think that right now it can be discouraging for people. I think that there's a lot of places where there is interest, and then people feel like they can't get involved. So for example, to put it concretely, I think, for example, there's a lot of people who would make very good officials, but don't necessarily have the full EYP previous experience, that maybe we could consider reforming the selection process to include that. I haven't really fully thought this out, but I think the selection process deserves more attention, and any changes we make should obviously first evaluate how they affect it. But I think anecdotally, like from people I've talked to, there's people who are discouraged because of that. And then the second one is a culture of inclusion. So this goes with my broader emphasis on diversity and inclusion and welfare. I think another thing that discourages certain people is the atmosphere in EYP. Thanos, I know you and I have talked about this. I think that, again, it's a cultural shift. I think in the past, there was more, as well as going along with the competition atmosphere, there's a certain amount of stress and intensity of an EYP experience. And that isn't for everybody. I know that for a fact, that there are people who feel that they can't and don't want to be a part of an organization that, for example, requires that you stay up very late and you don't have time to yourself. That just doesn't suit certain personalities and certain people. And I think that we need to do more in terms of welfare and diversity and inclusion policies to make sure that people feel welcomed and able to continue in an organization. And I'll say one more thing on that, which is I really think it's important to fix this issue, because the people who experience the most effects of like a stressful working environment are those people who are already marginalized because of other experiences. So for example, if you don't have a supportive home environment, or you face mental health issues, and then you come into an environment that doesn't adequately support you, I think you're less likely to continue. I'm not saying we're always that in EYP. I think our culture has shifted a little, but I would definitely and promote inclusion policies as a way to also contribute to helping tackle the human resources problem. I've talked enough. Those are two things that came to mind.
Thank you very much. I'll just take it from there then, because yeah, out of the two that you just mentioned, I think we can more or less all agree that the culture of inclusion, it's a shift. As you mentioned, it's a process, and I think that this has already, this process has started moving in the right direction a few years ago, but we definitely shouldn't think that we're there or anywhere close. So absolutely agree with that. With that emphasis, but the selection part that you mentioned is something that I want to talk about even more, because it's very strange that we are even talking about selection in the first place. As Lika mentioned at the start of this call, we're all volunteers. Why is there this assumption that it's normal that we are lucky if we get to volunteer for this organization? I have a very personal story for this, because my sister, who is 4.5 years younger than me, has recently got involved in EYP after a last-minute dropout through COVID. Very fun, very cute. The thing is, I've been trying to get her involved in EYP for over 3 years, and she really wanted to as well. But through a variety of factors, one of which being EYPNL having the system where you join through schools, this is not the case anymore. Again, progress is being made, but there are still all these barriers that prevent people who want to be part of our project, want to be part of our network, from being part in our network. So then when we have this 30-some years of this expectation that you are lucky if you are given the chance to volunteer, and then suddenly we find ourselves with not enough volunteers, this is biting us in the behind, pardon my French. So I think, if anything, this is showing us, like with everything COVID related, it is not necessarily a problem in itself. It is rather showing us an underlying problem. So I think I would, as a governing board member, of course, this comes down to what the NCs want, but I would try to start formalizing some procedure by which people can join our network also without being selected first. And then as just a small appendix before I hand it over to Janis, is that what I'm seeing now is that for a session I'm presiding in Ireland, we had 40 chairs apps, but 0 EA apps, because there is this weird disbalance in where people are at right now, experience-wise. After a couple of years of digital sessions, there's a lot of people who are jumping at the bit to get started, to start their traditional EYP career, whatever you want to call it, and not enough people who are in that in-between stage, who haven't gone straight to presiding since COVID ended, but who are also experienced enough to be in that in-between stage. So I also think that although we are seeing a very acute HR problem right now, this is also in large due to the, well, let's say once in a lifetime circumstances that we're in. And I can't say for sure, but I think that in 1 to 1.5 years, this process or this problem will have passed. So yeah, that's my answer to your question, Lika. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. My take on this would be, I would agree that we have underlying problems in EYP, but I also assume that there's some general points to take into consideration that are just there out in the whole volunteering section, let's say, or not volunteering section, but where other organizations struggle as well. I think it's the fact that people are having much more demands in terms of what comes from school, university. A lot of people rather focus on small project-based involvement than long-term involvement. So I would say, yes, let's have a look at EYP and what we can do here, but also what is there as like patterns in general, how can we change our events or activities to that. Not to say that everything is amazing in EYP, but I think it's a two-way approach, which I would answer with two different things. First is it's structures that we need to look at in EYP. I would agree that selection is one thing. We have already discussed this in the past, and there's pros and cons for it. I know that there's national committees who are very clearly said that they're not so much happy in working on this. But I would definitely also agree or welcome more talks on this. I would say that it also comes down to what priorities do we have in the network. It was one of the questions also in the GB questionnaire. So maybe we also have to be honest with ourselves. We cannot always do everything and just squeeze the last bits out of our volunteers and like organize another thing. I think the numbers of events have raised year by year, and we now kind of experience that there's maybe a limit. So this aspect of quality and quantity definitely comes in this question. For outreach, I would make the point that for me, we should not confuse outreach with capacity building. I think foremost relevance of outreach is just outreach, reaching out to young people who would not have the chance to have any kind of education experience that we provide. And then if some people from them stick around, I think that's good. But for example, in my own NC, we had a year-long discussion about our school events, and I think it is really important to not overload those kind of activities with the expectation that these people stay around and so on. I think we cannot have them fixing our problem, but it's important to do something for them. Where I would agree is rather focusing on the strategy pillar number 4, which is on volunteers and growth of volunteers, rather than on the outreach one, which is number 5. And to look at how can we offer more project-based involvement, how can we make the environment more welcoming. Like I have introduced in my own NC jury talks to the activities where you just sit around with young people and like tell them what is your story about EYP. Maybe you're not that tuck up head of jury, but you have like a fun story to tell. I think storytelling is really much of the most important thing that we have, or tool. If we would ask around here in the group, probably almost everyone has a story how they got into the network, and I think most of the people, it's connected to a certain person that asked them or invited them or told them to come. So this is really something that we have to strengthen. We have already set a little bit of best practice exchange for the future. With the HR summit that is coming up, there will be also some funding for next year that we hope we can make doable, and I would, as a GBM member, support that. And I think another question next to project-based involvement would be how can we transfer the digital participants and volunteers into volunteers that also come to activities and events. That's a big question. And my last point is, it's also one of the main points from my manifesto. I think we're lacking in an event type that is just for volunteers to experience this great experience that young participants have, which is just going to an event, having no duties, having just a nice time, reconnecting with people and having this self-growth, and not being, busy with all the coffee breaks all the time, which is why I really would like to see such an event coming up. I gave it the name of EYP Fest. I mean, that's discussable, but I think it would be nice to have something for these kind of people who are the backbone of our organization.
Thank you, everyone, all three of you for answering this question. Of course, probably you will along the way, we will get even more ideas on how to address this issue. Now, as you already know, and now I'm talking to the attendees, the Q&A session is sort of open, so just please feel free to raise your hands. Yeah, Tom is just leaving us. He just let us know. But yeah, basically, if you have any question, just please raise your hand and I'm going to give you the floor and you can ask your question. We are now discussing volunteers, personal growth, and also human resources in the network. So if you have any question regarding it, please feel free to ask and raise your hand. Now, for now, I don't see any questions. I myself have a lot of questions. I always have a lot of questions. So I urge you to come up with the ones that also concern you, or maybe I'm not representing everyone right now and everyone's ideas. So please feel free. Laura, please. Unmute yourself.
There. It's so difficult after 2 years of Zoom meetings. Somehow you forget where the mute button is. I'll save you. I'll ask a question. Eva, first of all, thank you so much for running in these elections, having organized them last year. It's a struggle to get people interested in governance, and it's just so good to see that for the extraordinary elections, there's 3 candidates. My question was kind of specifically aimed for Thanos, because he mentioned the Year of the Youth, for instance, and the importance of reaching out to EU institutions. And these are all, your priorities seem to be relatively executive in their function, whereas the GB is much more strategic in the role that it plays in the network. So I was wondering, what made you go for GB rather than, for instance, initiate an EYPNL project to HO, or enter the NC board, or join the international office in coordinating these activities? Because the way that I understood it, maybe it's also a wrong interpretation, that seemed to be a little bit more your interest, the path that you want to take.
Thank you very much. I'm not entirely sure what you mean that my priority seems more executive focused. So I'll just try and answer your question best I can, and if you want to add something to it in a bit. But to me, the reason for running for GB and also for running specifically right now is because I think that right now is the best time to set up a strategy for how the EYP on the international, on the umbrella level, can engage with policymakers, with decision makers. So when you say that it seems more focused on the executive level, my first association is obviously it's not going to be me who is going to be traveling to Brussels 12 times a year or something like that to talk and say what we in our network want to, but I want to set up these structures so that people from all countries can get involved in a projects such as the Young European Ambassadors, and to also have a project like that ongoing network-wide every year. So we have had quite long strategic discussions on what we would imagine this project to look like, and this year this was organized by the IO specifically, this is true, with involvement of the GB. And I think that to raise it to the next level and to get over all the, let's say, organizational hiccups that the Ambassadors project encountered this year, it would be good to have somebody on the GB who is responsible for the strategy and the outreach and the partnership side of this EY international strategy, someone with the experience of this program as well. So since there will be someone on the IO organizing this project anyway, I think it would be good to have bridge and to have somebody on both sides of the aisle who knows how to work in this context.
Yeah, thank you, Thanos, for answering the question, and also Laura for asking one. I think we are also now kind of slowly moving into this discussion that we also had during the previous town hall about the educational vision of UIP, and also like vis-a-vis the projects that we are running right now. But before that, I think we have like a question from Philip regarding the selection specifically. So I'm going to give him the floor to ask this question and you to answer, and after that we can already move on to the discussion that was kind of very organically and naturally came here regarding this education and the active citizenship. Philip, please.
Thank you. So as mentioned in the chat, I'm very surprised by the candidates' mention of selection criteria being such a burden for the HR, and I would like to hear your perspective on how would they approach the selection criteria on a network level as GB members, and if they really see it as such an HR burden, given that many NCs already select for long-term involvement of people rather than being, the perfect delegate, which may not stay within the organization. And also those NCs still are right now facing, as a consequence of COVID and the pandemic, still facing an HR crisis, and some even lack delegate apps. So do you really see this as such a burden for the HR and the growth of the network? Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Janis, I see your hand. Please go ahead, and then Aliosha and Thanos, you can follow with your answers. Okay, cool.
Yes, I do see relevance to talk about selection and selection criteria, not necessarily from the narrow perspective of human resources, actually. I think it's more a question of how to keep people around and how welcoming our organization is. But as you said, I think we already lack the pool of people a step beforehand. I could see it from events that I was involved in myself or my own NC. We have a pool of people who always apply for the same same positions in officials, or we have missing delegate or delegation applications from schools and so on. So I mean, the selection only comes in later, and I don't think it necessarily when it comes to going to an event, it keeps you, it prevents you from going there, but probably it's a question of how to keep people around. So I would separate those two questions and tackle them individually. The one being, how do we reach out to schools or other target groups like university students maybe? I personally think, yes, teachers have become less of importance in our network, but I think we can still activate them much more. Our network has a rich methodology that we can share with them. They can also share theirs, and I think there's potential to also partner up with organizations that work in the civic education and create activities there. And those teachers and educators might then be door openers to reach out to new schools and so on. And the other question then is more like, okay, those people who are there, how can we make it interesting to them to keep around? And that's what I said beforehand. Maybe it's not necessarily for those people the best idea to stick around for 2 years on the board. We need those people, but I think we also should offer other types of activities, other types of involvements first, to have diverse people who might be more project-based, interested, and so on. Yeah, that would be my answer on it. I hope it helps.
Great.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So thank you, Philip. Please respond if I don't answer your question. So I think two things here. One, when I said selection procedures, I actually also meant the way we quote unquote select officials. So application processes, and generally what I'm talking about with selection is how we get from a pool of people who want to volunteer for EYP or want to participate, and then take them into the roles that our organization needs. So that can be split into the delegate selection and the official selection broadly. And when I say official selection, I also include NC maybe and other things like that. So on the delegate selection process, Yeah, I'm not interested, and especially on the GB, our job is definitely not to get to the minutiae of saying, here's the jury selection spreadsheet you should use, here's the criteria you should use, blah, 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 blah. That's not our job. But I do think that juries, that framing in a selection process generally can have a detrimental effect on the inclusion and the human resources. And I think that's because it can discourage people from proceeding in the organization. So for example, I served multiple times as a jury member, and I saw very inconsistent and sometimes lacking procedures across NCs for ensuring that the process is A, fair, but also B, beneficial in terms of like long-term involvement. Like I think, so what I'm trying to say here is I think that there is a role for us as the international coordinating body, along with the IO, to gather best practices and help disseminate those, to think. So for example, what I would, let me get straight to the business. What I would do as a GB member, and I think a GB member's role would be to help evaluate, like, for example, make a committee with a bunch of heads of jury and maybe people who have worked on this for a while, and think about different experiences, gather experiences on how selection procedures relate to inclusion and human resources problems. And that definitely can have many diverse experiences, because I know NCs have different problems and not problems. And then facilitate those discussions to come up with some best practices that can then be shared out. So that's a practical example of the delegate selection. On the official side, I think that this is, for me, the problem that we're actually talking about when we talk about HR, which means like how you get people into the roles that you need, whether it's an editorial assistant or chairs or NC members or even like GB members or things like that. And generally, I think that I just know for a fact, like Thanos was giving the anecdote about the other people, I know lots of other people who wanted to stay involved in EYP or who want to stay involved in EYP and could do it in, for example, if someone is busy during most of the year and then has a certain few weeks open and they apply to 3 events there and then they don't get in, they're discouraged from staying involved and they don't stay active in our network. I think it's our job to provide lots of different ways for people to stay involved and make sure that the selection procedures don't discourage that. And this also, to build on something Janis said, maybe involves different entry points. Like I don't think our assumption should be, I think we should become a more open network to better harness the volunteers who are interested in us by making the processes for becoming a volunteer in a certain position more transparent and accessible. That's a high level answer, but I hope that gets at your question.
The third one to answer, I'll keep it short since most of the good ideas have already been mentioned, but just to highlight something about what you said, Philip, it's not necessarily, I think, that the selection criteria that we have at the moment are the reason that people are struggling to get into HR. Rather, the fact that this organization was built on the idea of a selection. You know, it was initially very centrally organized by teachers sending their school delegations, and then of course there's always this competition between different schools. And over the course of the past 34 years, at some point we decided, hey, this is not necessarily exactly the kind of organization we want to be, but you can't just undo decades of organizational, institutional structure just because you want to be something different. So what Janis mentioned, for instance, these events where not necessarily all the participants have to do something, so also you don't necessarily need to select everybody who goes there. This is a new fundamental way of thinking about the way that our organization can involve people and can keep people involved, that kind of clashes with this idea of what EYP is or what it should be. But I think that we can do a lot more with our organization if we move away from this very selection centered, and once you get selected you go to a higher level, and once you've been chair a couple of times you get to be a VP, and once you've been a VP a couple of times you get to be a president. This way of thinking, that's what I would want to move away from. So that's not necessarily having different selection criteria, but also having a broader palette of things to offer to participants who don't want to have to deal with selection.
Thank you, Thanos. Aliosha, Janis, you want to quickly follow up?
Yeah, I just want to once more underline that I think it is important to look at selection, but not to look at it from this only like very practical perspective of how do we get people, how do we fuel our human capacities, but just because we believe that maybe selection is something to overcome. And if we think so, this is a process that will take a lot of time because it's so much part of our DNA that it will not happen until next year, and it will not solve our human capacities crisis right now. So I think it's even harmful for both of those questions to be too much interlinked, because people might then get caught up on it. For the human capacities point, I think it's the best really is, and the BNC came up with it itself, is to put NCs together, for example, in this Human Resources Summit, and create different rooms for different questions and different scenarios and situations of NCs, because the network is very diverse, and to provide and come up with solutions that are very much based on the specific needs and situations, and then share them in the network. I think that's the best way, and not so much a centralized approach.
Thank you. Now let's move on to the next area that we would like to discuss. It's EYP strategy and its implementation. As you know, EYP strategy is all out there. So now we are in the process and like moving towards the implementation phase. So I think also like one of the main ideas and like difference with the new EYP strategy was to have network more involved in not only creation but also implementation of the of EYP strategies. That's why it's also now EYP strategy, just not like international strategy. If you have questions about the implementation, please feel free to again raise your hands. If not, then I would like to actually ask the question. It was, I think, voiced during the previous town hall as well. Like, how would you see wider audience and volunteers and the members involved in the implementation of EYP strategy? And how actually you would like it to see closer to the NCs, because we also know that NCs have also sometimes individual strategies, not all the NCs, but some NCs do have. So how would you actually balance, like also support the NCs to have their own strategy and to kind of pursue their goals and their ideas, but at the same time, we have EYP strategy, right? And we have the initiatives and we have objectives that we would like to meet in this 5-year span. So how would you like, and how you would see this balanced, and how would you like your role at the GB members to support members, volunteers, and the NCs in this implementation phase? I would also really would like to hear more like a practical ideas, how you would like this working out actually. And Aliosha, maybe you can start. Janis, you can like continue, and Thanos afterwards.
Okay. It's tough to start with a bunch of concrete ideas. Maybe give me 10 seconds. I just want to make sure it's a good response.
It's no problem. Whoever technically wants to start, you can.
Yeah, if somebody else wants
maybe
to.
You
I
want
can
to,
go.
I don't know, or Janis.
Yeah, I mean, I have a little bit of advantage here, having worked on this for 2 years. So yeah, I think I have a quite clear idea of how, at least I imagine it, and so far I've seen a lot of support from the network for it. I will in the end come back to how I see the potential in the end. The structure, how I see it in terms of the EYP strategy is we have the pillars now, the different areas of work that we want to prioritize for the next 5 years. And I think that should be the focal points to build those initiatives on. We have started to create first ideas with the last BNC meeting, and to really emphasize this network approach rather than national committees versus international level. I think we need to bring people together who see a certain problem and they have ideas on to tackle it, because there's the motivation, there's the energy, rather than, you know, going through a checklist and do work that you don't really believe in, but you can then share those results and those best practices for others who might want to put their energy and focus first somewhere else, but still need to tackle the other one. So we kind of like do this puzzling of solutions, and don't have to be like, oh, okay, now for 3 years we only focus one area, and then maybe there's time in the end to come back to, I don't know, inclusion, but just to have a look at what everyone wants to work on. And these should be really like members, volunteers, alumni, NCs together. I see this really as a solution for the entire network, because what we have seen in the past STARK cycle was then when we started and when we ended it, from the beginning to the end, not even half of the NCs had created a national strategy. This is not a blame, but it's just a fact, and it shows that the whole process was quite technical, and creating a 10 or 15 pages document doesn't even guarantee for anything. So my approach for like bringing those things maybe into a national context is to help NCs to come up with much more practical, hands-on tools that can be used ideally in an everyday situation. So whenever there's a board meeting or board call, you take out those documents and like work with them and prioritize your work with it. That, at least I think in the last year, it was really helpful for the GB to always have the strategy in mind and look at the strategy. Okay, which area does it fit, and is it a priority, or should we maybe focus something else? That would be like the first layer, and the second layer is then also to come up with concrete solutions. I think that's much more sustainable in the long term, to not interlink national strategies with this EYP strategy, but have more flexible tools for the NCs, and then they can also adapt it year by year, because what we saw is also that there's the national committee boards that change, of course, and it needs to be doable for them. There can be much more complex systems. I know it from my NC that try to come up with something new, and I think it somewhat works now, but you need to put a lot of effort in handing things over and making sure everyone is on the same page. And we already have this difficulty with the EYP strategy. So I believe it's more helpful to have that one in the center, and then more small tools and small initiatives around it as satellites, wherever everyone can jump on the things that they are interested in, where they have expertise, or where they can bring a perspective from outside of EYP.
Thank you, Janis. Anyone would like to continue?
Yeah, sure, I'll have just a broad outline. As Janis mentions, and as I acknowledge also, he does have an advantage here. He knows much more about this than I do, I'm guessing also than Aliosha does. The main thing, however, that I would keep in mind from the strategy perspective, from the GB's perspective, is that all we can do is play this coordinating role in this regard, I think. When a smart development that helps national committees figure out a faster, more efficient, quicker, safer way of reaching its national goals is made up in one NC, the best thing that the GB can do is make sure that there is a system in place to have this be shared between as many NCs where such a system would also fit as quickly as possible. Concretely, as Janis also proposed, this idea of best practice sharing, making sure that all the different NCs don't have to constantly reinvent the wheel all throughout Europe every time they want to do something, I think is the most important role that the GB has in making sure that these that the capacity, the limited capacity that we sometimes have, that you also mentioned, Lika, isn't wasted doing the same work twice. And then when it comes to making sure that the GB can reach its goals while the national committees reach theirs, I mean, it sounds a bit like in the question there is this assumed contradiction between NC goals and GB goals, when I don't think that should be the case at all. I also don't think that is the case. So this dichotomy that's created is not entirely fair, I think. But it is, of course, true that although they should complement each other, sometimes there is a disconnect in what we're trying to achieve and in which time frame. And I think that if something like that happens, of course, as the GB representative, I would prioritize reaching the EYP international goals. But at the end of the day, we are the NCs, we are the networks. We have to make sure that there is always a proper balance between what is done on the coordinating level, on the umbrella level, and what is decided by the national committees within their countries.
Thank you, Thanos.
Maybe-
Aliosha?
Yeah.
No, go ahead. It's okay. If you
So,
like.
yeah. So my vision for strategy is values driven. I think the GB should be a knowledge hub, a place for high level coordination and training. I'll tell you what this looks like very concretely, and then I'll go back to saying what it means in a high level. I thought the Active Citizenship Lab was great. Credits to Vicky, who's here, for being there. I thought that was a great example of saying, I know it's partly because we got funding from a special source, but I thought it was a great example of how to best implement a strategy, because we had a clear value, active citizenship. Well, not that clear. We were figuring it out kind of as we were going along, but that's great because it was a bottom-up thing as well. Like, it wasn't just somebody coming in and saying, okay, here's what you have to do. Instead, it was bringing together people who had an interest already in this from across the network. And in particular, what worked really well at the Active Citizenship Lab was it wasn't just like NC members. There were some NC members, some people who were presidents, some people who had organizers, basically people involved in lots of different projects and initiatives across the network that were interested in this value. And together we shaped, there was a lot of discussion about what this looks like and how to implement it in all the different projects. I think that's really effective because it's not a top, it's exactly what both the other people were talking about. It's not a top-down imposition of saying, here's the EYP international strategy, you have to do it. But it's also not just a bottom-up, like, okay, well, we're just doing whatever without anything. I really think, for me, the Active Citizenship Lab is the best example so far of meeting at the middle, where we're saying, here's a value that we've identified in our strategy and we really want to prioritize, and we're putting our resources in it so that we have a place for coordination, for discussion, for trainings, for external input that then supports volunteers in their work. So generally, I think that stuff like that should be expanded on. I think that ideally everyday decisions are guided by the strategy, which means people are aware of our core values. I think we need to be very, very clear about them and try and, I know Janis has been working on this, try and make them more visible and relevant to every day to all the EY peers. And then if we have those in mind, I think our projects and policy decisions should be guided by the strategy. So that's how I see it working out. Yeah.
Thank you, Aliosha. Janis, unless it's absolutely necessary for you to follow up, I would actually move on to the next topic, which is EYP priorities for the next years. Or if someone maybe, if you have any question regarding EYP strategy and its implementation, please feel free to ask the questions.
I just wanted to say that we already have priorities that are not GB or NC because we decided together on the strategy. What I think now is really important to do is to get the commitment from everyone, and that might not necessarily fully be the case. And that's, I think, one of the biggest questions that we should discuss in the next months. How much energy is everyone willing to put into the strategy?
Yeah, thank you everyone for this round and for your thoughts on EYP strategy. I think, like, I feel like that you like kind of all anchor for EYP strategy to be like really in the center of what's on the mind of the GB, and like how the network will be driven in the future. So I think that's very nice, and I also feel like that strategy like is meeting its objectives with it as well at some point. Yeah. The next, as I mentioned, next area that we would like to cover is EYP priorities. That is, I think that was also part of the questions in your question in your manifesto. I think what I would like to hear is not only what you see as priority, like in terms of the projects next years, but also to like kind of also follow up the discussion that was sparked like kind of 15 minutes ago here about this education, like what the direction is, like more priority, where we should go as a network. If you think it's, for example, I do not see this as like white and like black. I think there is definitely a lot of gray in between. But if you have like a specific vision how it should be and what should have the priority, then I would like to hear two things. If it's like, for example, education, how you would see YP unlocking its potential there, or making it like more impactful, or making it like more visible, and like diversifying it, and like suggesting and like coming up with like more diverse formats, and the session or methodology for the participants, or how to make it understandable for others and for external organizations and the people. And if you think that it's not that necessarily the education, but rather than more like our dialogue with the policymakers, politicians, and etc., then like where you would like also see their potential, and how you would like to see educational also network doing it in a way that we also are very true to ourselves and to our core values and our roots, and that is like we are educational program, right? So yeah, just also we're gonna have the answer from everyone. I think maybe I'm gonna actually start from Janis or Thanos here, whoever you want. Maybe Aliosha can go next. But you will all answer this question, so please feel free.
Thanos, you want, or should I go? Okay. I think what I would like to see more is, or what I think we already do well, is diversifying the activities that we have. It fits also with the discussion that we had before in terms of giving different opportunities to different people. When we had the impact framework process going on, there was interviews with different people from different levels of the network, and I remember very well the interview that I had. And I kind of realized what I personally really like about EYP, which is that you come here and you have all the different options what to do. You can become an organizer, you can become a chairperson, you can journalism, you if you want, you can end up in an IS, but you're also fine without doing it. You can do board work, but you don't have to. GB is also something that some people really are interested in. Some people think, oh my God, that's super abstract, I would not do that. And I think that's really what I like, is the unique educational experience that you get in EYP, and that's something that I want to preserve. And that's why it's also what kind of guides me when answering this question about education or active citizenship, policymakers. I wouldn't say it cuts off the aspect of active citizenship. It's one of our pillars of strategy, so clearly it has importance. But I think the difference in what we do, or what we can do as an organization, and what other organizations can do, it stops when we talk about certain policy areas, when we talk about housing, when we talk about environment, and so on. We don't really have the expertise here, and we also we lack the structures. How do we even decide within EYP what is the right policy answers on certain questions? So I think it would be wrong to pressure us in a direction that we probably will be very difficult to serve any purpose in. And we're also not, even though we're called European Youth Parliament, we don't have a mandate. We're not really representative to young people in Europe. There's other organizations who are much better with that. But I think there's still potential. We don't have to stay where we are right now. I think where EYP was for years and years was people come to sessions, they discussed topics, and then you were like, oh, now you're an active citizen, go off ahead and be a great European. Whoop, whoop. But that's probably where we should continue to work with them, and we already did that. I think we can do much more in terms of, okay, what is your topic you're interested in? What would you like to do about it? How would you do it? How can we help you within EYP? And then maybe take it on either within EYP or outside EYP. The important part, though, is that I think we should make sure that the character of our organization is not changing, because that's what I believe is the good part about it. And so I would be very sad if one day people join this organization with the belief that, you know, there's this one project that is run in the organization where you can meet the president of the commission, and that's the one final goal that you can reach in EYP. I think that would be a bit too, it kind of takes away from what EYP has and can offer.
Aliosha, do you mind if I go next? Thank you. So actually, because I want to respond to what you said, Janis, a lot of the things that you said I can fully agree with. We are in the basis, we are a peer-to-peer educational organization, and I don't think that should or will ever change. But then when talking about this active citizenship, and when we're talking about this wanting to engage people, you mentioned that we don't have the expertise to suddenly, I don't know, come up with a solution to the housing problem that exists in, I don't know, many capitals, for instance. And yeah, it's true, we're not experts on housing, but we are an organization composed of those people whom this crisis affects the most. True, we are called the EYP. We don't have a mandate despite that, but we do represent 35,000 young people across the continent. I'm not saying it's the same as having democratic legitimacy, but it is, as I write in my manifesto, somewhat of an untapped treasure. You mentioned very rightly that we don't have the institutions in place to collect this kind of information, which is exactly what I want to do during 1 year on the board of the GB. At the very least, make a start so that we can start collecting this kind of information, so that we can start having our voice be heard. I agree, it would be a shame if our organization turned into the kind of organization that people join because they want to meet Ursula von der Leyen. But, well, first off, I really don't think Ushi is that popular. And secondly, I don't think that by having this option, EYP will magically transform into a completely different organization. What I want to do is to start really practicing what we preach, which is that we want to have people engage with the environment around them, the society around them. We tell these young people, you can make a difference. You can go out there and start making a difference. So I think that we as an organization should also at least aspire to get out there and start making a difference. So I'm curious what you have to say on all of that. And also one very specific question, which is that you mentioned that there's other organizations in Europe who can do this much better than us. Maybe I'm very ignorant about this, but I can't think of another organization with a pan-European, such a broad membership base that would have the capacity to do something like this the way that we can. But I would be very happy to be proven wrong.
Thanks, Thanos. Thanks, Janis. Great. So there's a lot to take from both of your points, but I think I'm going to try and focus on articulating my vision. And it's actually interesting, Janis, because you mentioned having an interview for the impact framework. That's also something I had that helped me think about this. But I realized that I think it's fundamentally different than yours and Thanos's position. For me, EYP, it is educational and it is in part related to the political process, but it's really a place for expanding connections. It's a place for not just educating, but inspiring and empowering young people to be informed and open-minded and responsible and active citizens, with the aim of, and for me this is really, really important, and I'll explain why, with the aim of achieving a democratic, peaceful, sustainable, and open society. Okay, what does this mean? Why is it important? And in the interview, I was thinking back to one of the events I was involved in EYP Cyprus during the pandemic, where because it was online, for the first time, we had a lot of Turkish Cypriots participate, like something like 30% of the people in their EYP Day event were Turkish Cypriots. And they got together in committees like we ordinarily do in EYP with Greek Cypriots to talk about the relevant political issues. And I was racking my mind, like you are, Thanos, in a different context, racking my mind for another organization that can really do that. This is like very particular in the case of Cyprus, but generally, I think our methodology, and this is where I agree with you, Janis, our methodology is rich and able to support people to have these really powerful cross-cultural dialogue and encounters with people that hold different political positions and identities than them in a way that I also fail to see in any other organization. But for me, that's more than just education. That's a form of real political involvement. Like I saw in that encounter, and it really stayed with me because that's my idea of EYP. Like I'm like, wow, what an organization that can bring together Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot youth, forget about like this divide, but it's not in an explicitly bi-communal thing. Like there's a lot of projects that are framed as like peace project, blah, 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 blah. But we do it routinely. Like all our international sessions have Turks and Greeks and Cypriots and Armenians and Azerbaijanis and even, Russian, whatever, people that really in most organizations really don't see eye to eye. And yes, we do have conflicts. Like I've also heard the stories about GAs with very controversial points, but I really think fundamentally we do a really great job of not avoiding the difficult issues, but facilitating them through this powerful methodology. So the question is, what is the vision for EYP? It's a vision where we embrace the diversity of formats, we embrace active citizenship, we embrace our educational methodology, but with the fundamental aim of and these are the words of our strategy, of inspiring and empowering citizens to be active and informed and open-minded so that we can together create a Europe and a society that's more democratic, peaceful, and open.
Thank you, Aliosha. Once again, like reminder to all the people attending the town hall, if you have any questions, please raise your hands and ask these questions. This is your, I think, not the very last chance, but a very good chance at least to ask the questions. Yes, yeah, I do agree with Thanos. We want more questions. Janis?
I'm happy to take a question, but I'm also happy to answer Thanos and maybe comment on Aliosha.
Please, as we we don't have, but please be very quick. Okay.
The idea how, at least in my opinion, this whole change philosophy of EYP works, and it's also stated in the strategy, it's not like that we as EYP come up with a vision of how Europe exactly should look like, and then we make politicians complete this, but it's inspiring young people to discuss it among them and then mingle around their communities and their environments, be it on European level, be it on national or regional level, to work on it. And that allows for the diversity that's important. I think you may say, yes, resolutions in sessions don't go anywhere, but I think it's also, it changes something to the sessions if you as a delegate know that if your resolution is not passed, it's not going to the European Commission and so on and so on. And it changes something about the character of the event. And I think it has purpose that we have in the events, we allow this diversity and that there is not like this higher purpose always around you that pressures you to do the best. And it doesn't mean that we should not have any spaces in the EYP for it, but I don't want this to become, like a core work of EYP, because I believe, yes, there's other organizations. There's, for example, the European Youth Forum. It has around 100 organizations all across Europe, including a national youth council from almost every member country from the Council of Europe, and these have millions of members. Like there's 35,000 young people is like nothing, and I think they have much better tools to look all around the policy areas that are out there. I think what we are very good at and where is also a lot of unlocked potential in terms of advocacy and going to policymakers is, Lika, I'm almost done, is telling them what EYP needs, like, to be better in what we do, what other youth organizations need, youth participation in general. These are all areas that or education, these are already areas that we could do advocacy. So why do we not do that, but go already, you know, for the big and everything? We want everything, but we already learned that maybe doing everything is a bit too much and we don't have capacities for it.
Yeah, thank you, Janis, for the answer. Thanos, Aliosha, nothing to add. It's all okay, all good. Yeah, then great. I think I'm happy because we got to actually hear some of the like really interesting ideas about this, you know, like the difference, and like there is not that much difference after all. I think that to some extent, like I'm sorry,
may I just jump in for one more point, just to make it clear? I think we have the 2 minutes. I think because this question is not about if we want to involve or if we want to talk to policymakers, yes or no. It really comes down to what do we want to talk with them and in what terms. Like, I think when we take the ambassador project, for example, we had lots of meetings with them, and I think they were extremely interesting. But after an hour of environment talks, there was maybe like always one question about, okay, what do we do now? What is the structural change that will happen to listen to young people? And I think this was rather non-prioritized, but that was the scope of the project. No worries about the project. But I think that's exactly what it would be great to look at. How can we involve young people structurally so that young people can then decide themselves what topics they want to bring? And it's not like a weird EYP governing body that comes.
It's not a minute. It's not a minute. We do hear you. We do hear you, Janis. Yeah, I think we do understand, and I think you all made yourself perfectly clear. There is no necessity to overstate what you already stated, and I think people who will watch this, they do understand, and they can hear you out, and like if not, they can always also ask you more details and for more questions and more, you know, like more detailed explanations of what you would like to do. But I think definitely for me it's very understandable and it's very clear, and I think for all other people who are attending right now. Yeah, and now I think we are moving towards the last part of this town hall. Like the last area that was also, I think, quite interesting for the members is like generally inclusion, diversity, and welfare in the network, and something that, yeah, to my actually surprise was sometimes like really oversighted and overlooked by some of the maybe candidates, or like at least like I sometimes expect like more highlight on it, but sometimes I do not really see it in the bid. So I think this is a very high time for you to maybe kind of stress if you feel like it should be done, and if you feel like it's an important topic for the network, and also with the task forces that we had. And also with now, we also had the SAFE training that the network was really like waiting for it like for quite long, and unfortunately because of COVID, it like in the beginning really did not happen, but now we also have it. So there is already some knowledge accumulated, and like how you would like this process to be continued, how actually you would like this knowledge to be transferred in a like more transparent way. What are the main problems that you identify when it comes to the diversity and welfare in the network? There are many processes that are going on right now, how you would like actually see them continue. Should we like you know conclude them to some extent? So basically, what's your vision for it? And now you're gonna also again have the floor to speak up. Just feel like please be very mindful about time, because slowly, I would really like to wrap it up. And after that, you're gonna also have time to just have some concluding remarks and last final, like address to your electorate, why they should vote for you. So yeah, I think Aliosha, maybe you want to actually start, because I remember your manifesto really highlighted it a lot. So that would be interesting to hear. Yeah.
Absolutely. Basically, this is the issue that motivated me to run on the GB. I mentioned a story in the manifesto, but I'll say it again, which is that I was at the diversity lab and was talking to some people there. It's a great initiative, by the way, and kudos to Isa for running that. And then the panel we had on accessibility and disabilities was really eye-opening, in the sense that there were a lot of very simple things shared that we realized, that at least made me realize that, wow, I didn't think about these things. And us as an organization, we're really not very accommodating to a lot of people. So I won't go into examples because we don't have that much time, but you can ask about it, and hopefully it's clear. But my point there was how to take that to a higher level, because this was 1 hour with like 10 participants, but the things we mentioned need to be implemented in all events across the network, to be honest. And so I got in discussions with one of the people there, and she was like, oh, I know you're on the task force on anti-racism. How have people thought about making accessibility? And then I talked to Julia and we talked to Isa, and we tried to advance it through the process. But in that process, I also realized that I don't think we have the adequate structures to receive that kind of bottom-up input and then disseminate it. So I see the GB as being a place where we can take the last thing, okay, and I'll take this to the other side. The last thing I want is for us to have a vision of what diversity and equity and inclusion mean, especially us as 3 white guys, and then going and implementing it and forcing it on all NCs across 40 different countries, whatever. That's not the idea. But the idea is that there needs to be some way for these concerns to be elevated from the grassroots level and then disseminated across the network, because we can't have such widely disparate practices that perpetuate exclusion at multiple levels. Okay, I'm rambling a little. My vision is for this to be central to all our decisions, and for the GB to be a place to adapt our structures and procedures so that we can take all the experience that's accumulated and what we can gather from other organizations and spread that throughout. So this goes back to my understanding of the strategy of kind of how we implement it. We have values that guide our efforts. We have best practices that we collect as a knowledge hub, and then we disseminate those in trainings. And I'll say one more really practical thing, which is, like I said, I gave a training on this with, I was asked to give a training on this with Julia at the HO Summit last May on welfare and diversity. Again, I can speak about that for a very long time, but I won't. And then most recently, I really enjoyed giving the training at the National Safeguard Team training, because I think we really just sparked really interesting really interesting discussions by introducing critical perspectives. So what I did was not me telling people what diversity looks like, but just facilitating spaces. I gave a reading that I knew from my time in university, where I worked on a lot of committees that are involved in this. And people really appreciated it. They said it was really interesting to think about this differently and to think about it at a high level before diving back into the practices. So to underline this, and also looking backwards and what I want to change, I think that we have had a significant amount of work on specific like outreach activities and on a few areas of inclusion. I think there's a lot of omissions though, and I also think that there's a lack of really coherent, well thought out, pluralistic, inclusive engagement with these issues, which is also from what I found in our task force on anti-racism. We had a lot of different perspectives on all of this, but it was hard to reconcile across the network, and there's a lot of different opinions. So I don't see our role as imposing something, but I think it needs to remain a priority and be implemented through a bunch of specific actions like the ones I talked about. So sorry for taking up a lot of time, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Aliosha. Janis, do you want to go next?
Yes, I think from the strategy, we are already very clear where we want to go. In terms of the overall perspectives and vision on it, what we are lacking is a clear commitments, because in the end, it comes down to, okay, do we get certain people in our events? Do we lower barriers? Do we make language easier, or any other barriers that we could think of? Or are our events accessible for people with impairment and so on? So I think two steps are then needed now in between. While we have this overall visions, we need to pinpoint down what can we do about them. And that's what we will do, or hopefully the network will do in the next steps, to decide for all of the strategy areas concrete goals that you can look at in 1 year and know, did we achieve any movement or not? Because it tells also about what instruments and tools worked and what not, and then you can try and error and do it again. That's the first thing. The second thing that I think is super important, even though, yes, we are probably a rather privileged organization and we might not have all of these insights, is to just start it. To start the reflection and start the little steps that we can do. And that might be for every NC in a different area, in a different stage. And I think that's something that the GB is important to encourage and provide the spaces for, that this reflection happens. And we are not committing as a network to something abstract that is out there. And we believe, and everyone is like, yes, we would like to have an inclusive and diverse network, but then no one is really doing anything on it. It's not necessarily a specific problem only for this pillar of the strategy. It's almost for all of them. But I believe because this is one of the most difficult, it might be the area where it becomes most visible as well. Because for the people who are here, obviously it worked. So we have to think of people who are not at the table, who are not here and who don't participate, who are not in this call, who are not already aware of international governance and so on. Yeah, that I think would be my take.
Thank you both. I'll keep it very short, Lika. I know don't have a lot of time, and also I just honestly do not have nearly as much to say on this as Aliosha and Janis do. The one thing that I would want to highlight, yes, we need to start reflecting on this. We have already started reflecting on this. One thing that I think we are not acknowledging enough yet is that our organization can't do the same things it has always done, grow at the same speed it has always grown, and at the same time be as diverse and inclusive and welcoming for everybody. Like, if this is something that we find important, which I do find important, I believe all three of us here find this important, but if we as an organization want to put our money where our mouth is, it also means making some sacrifices. It means having smaller sessions so that there is more funding to present higher travel reimbursement to those delegates coming from less advantaged backgrounds. It also means thinking fundamentally about the type of venues that we have. Do we really need all of us to be wearing a suit at General Assembly? Seeing how not having a suit was for me a very big barrier of entry when I started EYP long ago. So the one thing I would add to this discussion that hasn't been said yet is that this strategy and a commitment to the strategy also requires difficult decisions and prioritization. And that is something that's a discussion I think that should be had much more actively on the EYP-wide level.
Thank you, Thanos, for keeping the promise as well and keeping it really short. I think I definitely think there is a lot of potential in it when it comes to the GB's work towards welfare and diversity generally. And I think that the next GB will really unlock it and continue doing a great job in this. But now we, I think on this like very positive note, we can wrap up this town hall. You're gonna all have 2 minutes to address the voters, the EY peers, members, and just address them and tell them why should they vote for you, what is the reason behind. You have like very strict 2 minutes reglement, so please keep it short and keep it in 2 minutes. And after that, I'm gonna say goodbye and wish you the best of luck. So who wants to start? I don't know. Thanos, Janis, Aliosha. Aliosha wants to start. Yes, thank you for the initiative and go for it.
I'll keep it short. I would love to have the opportunity to serve on the governing body for the next year. There's 3 things I would do and 3 reasons why. First off, I really want to build on our work in diversity, welfare, outreach, inclusion. These are things I've worked on before, things I think our organization can grow in a lot. I think I have the background to do it. And in particular, because this is continuing Julia Fachi's term, I think it's also natural to continue that work. So I would really want to work with her to continue that portfolio. Second, I want to develop our work in active citizenship because that relates to my basic vision of EYP as a place where we create connection in order to inspire and empower active citizens who can shape a more democratic, peaceful, and open-minded society. And lastly, I think with regards to strategic development, I'll also be able to bring in a critical outside perspective that can contribute something to our organization. So those are. Thank you for listening. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Aliosha. Janis, would you, or Thanos? Janis, you would basically. Do you want to go next?
Yes, because I also
please.
have it. I will follow Aliosha's example and keep it short. In fact, I will just stick to one priority, which I have made clear all throughout, the one reason why you should vote for me. I agree that the GB, the governing body, does have a responsibility to keep a lot of different things into account. The GB will keep a lot of different things into account, but why you should vote for me specifically is to start making this bridge, this active citizenship bridge, as Aliosha also mentions it, to start translating the output of our organization into an output in real life so that the young people, the young participants in our organization can have a meaningful impact. So this is what I will spend 1 year on the GB doing. If you think I should, vote for me, and if not, then vote for one of the others. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thanos. Janis?
Yes, thank you. I would be very happy to continue and conclude my time on the governing body with one more and last year. My main priority would be to translate the effort that we have been made with the strategy into the next crucial phase, which is the implementation, and make sure that it includes visionary ideas that obviously also come from the governing body, but are fueled by commitment that we need from the network. I'm also asking everyone to consider what commitment they can do. And it is fueled by more bottom-up processes like we exercised in the past 1 and 2 years. For example, on human resources capacities, on external communications, on diversity, inclusion, and so on. But I think we have a big responsibility as a governing body to facilitate this. I also have some specific ideas, for example, about the EYP Fest, external communication, as I said beforehand, or how to unlock the potential of educators. I don't bother you with these specific things right now. Go and read the manifesto, reach out if you have questions. It was a pleasure to be here on the town hall. Good luck to everyone.
Thank you, Janis. Thank you, Aliosha. Thank you, Thanos, and everyone else for joining today's town hall. I think Yeah, I think your answers were really clear, very nice, and yeah, good luck to you. Also, probably Joao will send this link out, so let's hope that others will watch this town hall as well. Yeah, thank you really, and very, very good luck with the elections. And yeah, just reach out to people, make them vote, get your answers activated, and yeah, let's make sure that these extraordinary elections, it has like a good turnout, because I really think it's very important that people are active and they look out who is representing them on the GB, yeah, just, you know, I think it might be very draining and tiring to, always reach out to people, but I think it's like, that's, people by voting shape their future and future of EYP. So yeah, good luck everyone, have a nice evening, yeah, see one of you as a GB member and others hopefully as remain like active volunteers of EYP network. So
because we need you, because we have an HR problem.
Okay, bye-bye, have a nice evening and good luck.
Bye, Ilya.
Bye, everyone.
Good evening, everyone. Bye.